Porsche has just made another U-turn, its second in about a year, and this time even the people building the cars are calling it a real retreat. Nobody's dressing this up as a temporary pause or a minor course correction. It's a genuine pivot back toward gas-powered vehicles laid out in a press release that plenty of people inside the company probably hoped they'd never have to write. One number tells you almost everything you need to know. Back in 2024, Porsche posted an operating profit of 5.6 billion euros. Just a year later, that number had crashed down to 413 million euros, a brutal 93% drop in 12 months. For a brand that used to be the most profitable car maker on the planet, that kind of collapse is hard to wrap your head around. Look only at the automotive side of the business and it's even uglier. Operating profit there fell 98%, down to just 90 million euros. And rather than stabilizing, Porsche kept cutting. More jobs disappeared, product plans got torn up and reshuffled, and the company started walking away from the bold EV strategy it had been pushing just a few years earlier. Its flagship SUV lost its electric-only status. A hybrid luxury sedan that was already in the pipeline got pushed back indefinitely. None of this happened in isolation. It's all part of a much bigger shift. This is the story of how one of the most trusted, most admired names in the car industry turned into one of its biggest cautionary tales and then somehow made a lot of the same mistakes twice. To really get how big this reversal is, you only need to rewind about 4 years. Back in 2022, Porsche wasn't just doing well. On a per-vehicle basis, it was arguably the single most profitable car brand on Earth. That year, the company moved roughly 309,000 vehicles and pulled in about 6.8 billion euros in operating profit, landing an operating margin close to 18%. For context, most automakers would consider an 8% margin a great year. Porsche was playing an entirely different game, earning more profit per car than nearly anyone else, despite selling a fraction of what mass-market giants like Toyota move. That success got so big that in 2022, Porsche pulled off something almost unheard of in the car world. It got partially spun out of Volkswagen and listed publicly, raising close to 9 billion euros at a valuation near 75 billion. For a moment, Porsche was actually worth more on paper than Volkswagen, the very company that still owned most of it. That's a wild achievement for a brand that had already clawed its way through the 1973 oil crisis, near bankruptcy in the early 90s, and several global recessions along the way. If you'd asked industry insiders back then which car maker seemed almost impossible to bring down, a lot of them would have said Porsche without hesitation. That kind of reputation gave enormous weight to what Porsche did next. In 2020, the company rolled out the Taycan, its first fully electric car. This wasn't some small side project, it was a loud statement that Porsche planned to own the premium EV space the same way it had owned sports cars for generations. A year later, then CEO Oliver Blume made it official. By 2030, 80% of everything Porsche sold would be either fully electric or hybrid. The Cayenne, Macan, Panamera, and 788 were all set to go electric over time. Only the 911 would keep leaning primarily on gasoline, treated almost as sacred ground for the brand. To back this up, Porsche poured close to 4.4 billion euros into EV production, new factories, and next-gen platforms, and teamed up with Swedish battery maker Northvolt to supply cells for its future electric lineup. At first, it looked like it was paying off. The Taycan got glowing reviews, picked up a string of awards, and hit its sales peak in 2021 with more than 41,000 units sold. For a luxury EV starting above $90,000, that's a genuinely strong showing. Analysts were calling it the thinking person's Tesla. Convinced Porsche had cracked a formula plenty of legacy automakers were still chasing. As pressure built, Porsche did something it had spent its entire history avoiding. It started discounting heavily. In some markets, Taycan prices dropped by as much as 35%, and even the 911, a car that almost never got marked down, saw discounts over 10% just to clear out dealer lots. It moved metal, sure, but it cost the brand something much harder to rebuild. Porsche's whole identity had been built on exclusivity, on the idea that you simply didn't haggle for a Porsche. That reputation had been one of its biggest assets, and it was starting to crumble. By May 2024, things in China had gotten even rougher. Dealers were refusing new shipments because their lots were already jammed with unsold inventory. And some were asking Porsche's headquarters in Germany for financial help just to manage the backlog. Then came another blow. In November 2024, Northvolt, the company's key battery partner for its EV future, filed for bankruptcy. Overnight, a huge piece of Porsche's electric roadmap was thrown into chaos. The fallout was immediate. The next-gen electric 718 Boxster, originally slated for 2025, got pushed to at least 2027. A few months after that, in August 2025, Porsche shut down its own battery production unit entirely, laid off about 200 workers, and wrote off nearly 400 million euros in investments that would never pay off. The electric Macan didn't fare much better. Already delayed by software issues, it finally reached buyers over a year late and sold only around 18,000 units in its first partial year, while costing roughly $30,000 more than the gas version and, according to plenty of tech-savvy buyers, running on a platform that already felt behind the competition. Inside the company, tension was no longer a secret. By February 2025, disagreements at the top had spilled into public view. And things got serious enough that Porsche fired both its CFO and its head of sales after they pushed back openly against CEO Oliver Blume. Meanwhile, the financial forecasts kept getting worse. The expected operating margin, once comfortably in double digits, dropped to 8.5% in April, then got slashed again just months later to somewhere between 0% and 2%. That's when the biggest strategic reversal hit. The ambitious 80% electric by 2030 target quietly vanished, replaced with a much vaguer promise to keep making gas, hybrid, and electric vehicles for the foreseeable future. In July 2025, a letter went out to Porsche's 36,700 employees in Germany that confirmed what a lot of people in the industry already suspected. CEO Oliver Blume admitted sales in China had hit historic lows, acknowledged that EVs were bringing in far thinner margins than traditional gas models, and pointed to new U.S. tariffs as adding even more financial strain. The takeaway was clear. The business model that had once looked unbeatable simply wasn't working under current conditions. To cut costs, Porsche announced plans to eliminate 3,900 jobs by 2029, capped annual production at 250,000 vehicles, and scaled Taycan production back from 2 shifts to 1. A lot of people assumed that was rock bottom. It wasn't. Just 3 months later, Porsche's board decided it was time for a change at the top. After nearly a decade running Porsche while simultaneously serving as CEO of Volkswagen, Oliver Blume was facing mounting criticism, with investors arguing the brand needed someone fully dedicated to it instead of splitting attention between 2 major automakers. During his time in charge, Volkswagen stock had dropped almost 30%, while Porsche's own share price had lost roughly half its value since going public in 2022. In October 2025, word got out that Porsche was in talks with Michael Leeders, a former McLaren executive and Ferrari veteran who'd also spent 13 years earlier in his career at Porsche itself. Leeders officially took over as sole CEO on January 1, 2026, stepping into a company already navigating one of the roughest stretches in its history. Unfortunately, the worst numbers were still coming. On March 11, 2026, Porsche released its full 2025 results, and Leeders' first earnings presentation as CEO wasn't pretty. Group operating profit had fallen to just 413 million euros, a 93% drop from 5.6 billion the year before. The Automotive division was even worse off, with profit down 98% to a mere 90 million euros. Revenue slid 9.5% to 36.27 billion euros, and after-tax profit collapsed 91% to just 310 million. The Taycan, once held up as proof that legacy automakers could compete in the EV space, sold only 16,339 units for the year, more than 60% below its 2021 peak of 41,296. Facing all this, Michael Leiters summed up his turnaround plan in 3 words: leaner, faster, more desirable. But buried inside Porsche's 2026 guidance was maybe the clearest sign yet of just how much the company's ambitions had shrunk. The automaker that once promised 80% electric sales by 2030 is now projecting battery electric vehicles will make up only 24% to 26% of total sales. And the retreat kept going. In February 2026, reports confirmed Porsche's flagship K1 SUV. Originally designed as an all-electric flagship on Volkswagen's dedicated EV platform, was being completely reworked. Instead of staying electric only, it will now share Audi's combustion engine architecture, built on the same foundation as the upcoming Audi Q9, with turbocharged V6 and V8 options. The SUV, meant to prove Porsche could pull off a large-scale electric flagship, is now, by design, a gas-powered vehicle first. Around the same time, more reports surfaced showing Porsche was also backing off its promise that the next-gen Boxster and Cayman would be electric only. Both will keep offering combustion versions alongside any electric variants. Which brings us to the announcement that sparked this whole discussion. On July 22, 2026, Porsche's supervisory board signed off on yet another major restructuring plan, and by the company's already rough recent standards, this one's among the most aggressive cost-cutting moves yet. And it's still not finished. Under CEO Michael Leiters, Porsche is reportedly gearing up for another round of cuts that could eliminate 5,000 to 6,000 more jobs by 2035. Stacked on top of the 3,900 positions already slated to go under the earlier plan. At the same time, Porsche confirmed another setback for its EV ambitions. The fully electric Panamera, once meant to be a cornerstone of its electric lineup, has been pushed well into the next decade with no new launch date announced. Reports also suggest Porsche is stepping back from the Volkswagen Group's software partnership with US EV startup Rivian, a collaboration once seen as key to improving Porsche's future EVs, but one that now appears to be sliding down the priority list. On top of all that, a new production chief is set to start in September. One anonymous Porsche engineer, quoted by German press, put it bluntly: walking the halls of Porsche's Zuffenhausen headquarters these days feels like watching the company rewind an entire decade. And that's exactly why this story matters, even if you'll never own a Porsche. For years, Porsche was the perfect test case for whether legacy automakers could pull off the EV transition. It had some of the fattest margins in the business, decades of engineering know-how, one of the strongest luxury brands on the planet, and a real head start over most competitors. If any traditional automaker looked capable of leading that shift successfully, Porsche was the name everyone pointed to. Yet the wheels didn't just come off once. The first real turning point came in 2025 when Porsche quietly dropped its 80% electric by 2030 goal. And now, even after bringing in a new CEO, rolling out a revised strategy, and launching yet another aggressive restructuring, the company is facing another very public setback. That's likely making executives in Munich, Stuttgart, Detroit, and beyond sit up and take notice. If Porsche, with all its engineering talent, financial muscle, and brand prestige, couldn't keep pace with newcomers like Xiaomi, a company that entered the car business by way of smartphones, what does that say about everyone else? It's probably a question a lot of auto execs are quietly asking themselves right now. But there's another lesson here that might matter even more. Porsche didn't just invest in EVs, it built a huge chunk of its long-term strategy around one very specific timeline. When demand didn't grow as fast as expected, that whole plan started to buckle. Its battery supplier collapsed. Factories had already been retooled for an electric future that wasn't arriving on schedule. Vehicles like the flagship K1 SUV plus the next-gen Boxster and Cayman had to be redesigned mid-development because customer demand no longer matched what Porsche had originally assumed. Meanwhile, automakers that kept offering gas, hybrid, and electric options side by side now look like they're in a much stronger spot, not necessarily because they bet on the right technology, but because they never staked their entire future on a single outcome. At the end of the day, Porsche's struggles weren't really about building a bad EV. Plenty of engineers and auto journalists still rank the Taycan among the best driving electric cars ever made. The real problem was something tougher to solve. Brand prestige alone can't make up for limited range. Decades of heritage can't erase a steep price gap. And a legacy of racing wins doesn't guarantee a win against tech companies that can outdevelop you on software and digital features. Right now, Porsche is stuck between two very different customer bases. Longtime fans still want the sound, the feel, the character of a traditional gas engine. Modern EV buyers want cutting-edge software, fast charging, seamless connectivity, the kind of tech that Chinese manufacturers and companies like Tesla are already delivering. At the moment, Porsche hasn't fully won over either group. Its cars are still too pricey for some, and its tech still feels behind for others. Even with new leadership in place, there's no obvious way out of that bind. And that's exactly why this latest announcement is turning heads across the industry. Porsche was supposed to be the strongest proof that legacy automakers could navigate the EV transition successfully. Instead, it's become one of the industry's biggest warning stories. Executives at BMW, Mercedes-Benz, Audi, and plenty of other manufacturers are almost certainly studying what happened here and asking themselves the same uncomfortable question. If this could happen to Porsche, with every advantage in its corner, what makes any of us think we're safe? So now it's over to you. Do you think Michael Leiter's new strategy can actually get Porsche back on track, or is the company just going to keep restructuring without ever fixing the deeper problem? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I genuinely read them, and a lot of the best topics on this channel have come straight from viewers like you. If you're new here, welcome to MotorZen. We dig into every angle of the car world here, from engineering and design to business strategy and automotive history, and we try to just follow the facts rather than pick a side. If that sounds like your kind of channel, go ahead and subscribe. New videos drop every other day, always focused on stories that actually matter, no filler. Thanks for watching, and I'll catch you in the next one.